Um, Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you to AutoSens for asking me to speak here. I can't really see you, but I'm assuming everybody saw Torsten's presentation this morning, and after that presentation, I'm not sure anybody here needed coffee. Quite sobering numbers from China, which of course is accounting for 1/3 of our industry today. And one message I wanted to convey, and it's not really part of my presentation, but I do try to convey this when I'm talking with people in this industry, which is that most of the high technology companies that are serving our sector are headed or heavily invested already in China, whether it's NVIDIA, Intel, Qualcomm, BlackBerry, Mobileye, you name it. If you're a leader in this space, your eyes are to the east at this point, because that's where the volume is and that's where the innovation is. And that's actually where innovation has been for quite some time. I haven't been to China in a few years, but when I was going, that was where things were happening the fastest. I don't know how many of you remember, it was the China market that saw the first car with Android, and that was a long time ago, the Roe v350. Of course, Android is all over the industry today. So I'm going to start off with a couple of slides from that I sort of reconstructed from a presentation that was given at the Management Briefing Seminar in Traverse City, Michigan, where they talk about the mega trends in the industry. And just because it's sort of quickly distilled what the conversation we're having about our industry and how we're this pursuit of autonomous driving while simultaneously instituting driver monitoring, which it seems to be that some sort of fundamental conflict. But actually, it makes perfect sense, because as cars become safer, and hopefully they are becoming safer. I come from the United States, if you haven't already surmised, and you would question whether cars are becoming safer if you came from the United States, because we're killing 40,000 people a year on our highways, and which tends to suggest that as cars are becoming safer, people are becoming a little numb to paying attention to the driving task, let's say. And it's interesting that Europe has taken the lead in saying, okay, we're going to make you pay attention. You need to be paying attention to the driving task. Yes, our cars are getting safer, but we need you engaged. We're not eliminating you from this process. But multiple speakers here have already talked about new AI methods coming into this conversation. Obviously, exhibitors here are showing generative AI and other artificial intelligence technologies infused throughout the vehicle, solving all kinds of problems. Advanced chip design, software-defined vehicle process models, accelerating the path towards automated mobility. Is supervised driving for fully automated driving near? I have to say I'm newly converted from a market analyst, so I'm a recovering market analyst, and now I'm an industry consultant. When you're a market analyst, you're supposed to deal with certainties. This is when level 2++ is going to happen. This is when level 3 is going to happen. This is when level 4 is going to happen. When you're a consultant, it's gray and ambiguous. And there's a lot of gray and ambiguous here at this conference, and the whole purpose of this conference is to try to get to certainty of some kind, whether it's regulatory or technical certainty. Is supervised automated driving reducing the crash risk? Obviously, Waymo thinks so. I think Cruise was trying to make the case. I don't think the case has been made. And if you've been in a Waymo, you understand that those vehicles drive differently. While the performance has been impressive, and I think in the opening segment you saw Trent Victor, who was speaking a year ago here, releasing the results saying that Waymo vehicles were certifiably driven safer than human beings. But my first experience with a Waymo, I was waiting at the front of the hotel, and the Waymo came and went around to the back of the hotel, back of the building. So I had 5 minutes to get to that Waymo. I had to run with my bag to the back of the hotel to get in the Waymo. And I'd been taking Lyft rides to get to my hotel, and the Waymo took a very different route. It didn't go on the highway, it took surface routes. So yeah, they're driving differently. They're driving in safer areas and perhaps in safer ways. Who is providing unbiased data for regulatory acceptance of AI-enabled driving? So a lot of the conversations happening on this stage and on the show floor are about validating our assumptions and trying to determine if we've got the right technology mix and the right tolerances. And are regulations for supervised or unsupervised automated driving in place? Are the regulations supported by suitable standards? I think it's clear we have a lot of work to do. And each region of the world is taking a slightly different approach to solving this problem. China, to my experience and from what I've seen and observed, takes an approach of establishing the test that your vehicle has to pass certain tests. It has to be able to demonstrate it can perform in certain ways. We've seen a lot of comment here from Euro NCAP, and the Euro NCAP has certainly taken a leadership role in trying to solve these problems, in particular with the driver monitoring question. And we had a great presentation from Alberto talking about the challenges in solving that problem. And he was definitely speaking to my heart when he was talking about the challenges of lane keeping. I just traded in my 2022 BMW X3, which had automatic lane keeping that one of my wise-ass sons turned on, which converted me into a non-BMW driver, because you don't really have to signal when you're changing lanes, do you? Well, I did then. Now I have a new model, and I'm back to the lane keeping turned off. But his point was very well taken in his presentation, that we don't want to turn off the consumer to keeping that feature turned on. It was an excellent point, and right at the end of his presentation, and he covered it in great detail, and it's very reassuring to know that Euro NCAP's going to focus on that. The US, and I'm going to talk about this, has changed this conversation completely in my estimation. Now, I'm not an engineer, but to my perception, the US has said with the latest regulation around FMVSS is that cars should stop hitting things. So they're not saying this is how to do it. They're saying do it, just figure out how to do it, which is one of the driving forces, again, behind this event. You know, is it radar? Is it LiDAR? Is it a combination of all of the above? Or is it something else? Is it artificial intelligence? These are the problems we're trying to solve, and the regulators are setting the table to solve these problems. We clearly don't have the definitive answers here today. That was clear from the roundtables yesterday. We're still hashing it out, still debating. I don't want to say fighting, we're debating. We want to solve these problems, which is the great thing about this event. So Europe is focused on driver occupant monitoring, NCAP, and driver control assistance systems. So this conversation is very different from the one in the US, but the US obviously is participating in these conversations. And I was tempted to read this, but I won't. You'll have access to these slides as an attendee. The point of including this text here is that it's intended to clarify what the purpose of the regulatory agenda is for DCAS. But if you read through what the regulations call for, it actually creates a lot of ambiguity and a lot of gray area, again, that we're expected to solve here in this industry. Similarly, the occupant status monitor, driver fatigue and distraction could be major factors in accident causation and can be detected directly by eye monitoring sensors or indirectly. We definitely need to solve this problem, but the US hasn't made it as much of a priority. In the US, from the Infrastructure Act, the focus was on impaired drivers. Now, in solving the problem of impaired drivers, we may have the collateral benefit of solving the problem for distracted or drowsy drivers at the same time. But it's slightly different. I'm not going to say not aligned with the European perspective, but it is slightly different. And again, I was going to read this a little bit, but maybe a portion of it. So I'm sure some of you know Mark van Impe. He used to be with Tesla. And I was boarding my flight and I saw this announcement. I had been trying to recruit him to speak here because he has been heavily involved in trying to work on the standards and regulatory activity. And he sort of captures this challenge that we're dealing with. So over the past 4 years, I've strived to accelerate the deployment of new ADAS technologies in global markets as the Secretary of the UN Task Force ADAS, developing the new UN Regulation 171, or DCAS. This regulation was a step change in the ADAS homologation approach from technically explicit requirements to performance-based assessment. Again, I would say the US has gone in a similar direction, results-based. opening the door for a wider array of systems. Just recently, UNGRVA adopted an amendment which will make more capabilities such as system-initiated maneuvers possible. Sadly, the decision was made to delay some of these capabilities for urban environments, possibly until 2028. This impacts Europe's competitiveness, and it's clear that the type approval framework needs to evolve to better and more quickly tackle innovative technologies. Perhaps temporary certification or deployment through pre-certification can prove a solution. But of course, this is no longer a headache for Mark Van Impe. He's now at SpaceX. But he was heavily involved in this. We all are, and perhaps if we're lucky, we get to the finish line in trying to solve a problem before we get shifted into a new opportunity or move on. So as I said, and I think this is a really big deal, NHTSA pivots to results-based approach. That's the headline from a blog I wrote about this. So NHTSA has finalized a new FMVSS that will make automatic emergency braking, including pedestrian AEB, standard on all passenger vehicles and light trucks by September 2029. The significance of the new standard lies in the priority placed on pedestrian safety and the requirement for direct sensing and detection of pedestrians. So this debate has been going at this event, at previous versions of this event, and it was going on yesterday at the roundtables, and it's going on today. You know, is it going to be thermal? Is it going to be radar? Is it going to be LiDAR or something else or some combination? The new standard requires all cars be able to stop and avoid contact with a vehicle in front of them at up to 62 miles per hour. I'm not an engineer, but I was a little bit shocked, and that the system must detect pedestrians in both daylight and darkness. The standard requires that the system apply the brakes automatically up to 90 miles an hour when a collision with a lead vehicle is imminent and up to 45 miles an hour when a pedestrian is detected. But the key here is cars should stop hitting things. I would suggest to you that cars hitting things is a product failure. You know, that it's not okay. And NHTSA has put the word out. Now, it's very easy for NHTSA perhaps to say this and require this and demand this and leave it to the rest of us to solve the problem. In the past, you would expect NHTSA to be conducting all kinds of research on its own to make this determination. They're leaving it to the market. So NHTSA is resource constrained, so I have to hand it to them for being clever here to solve this problem in this way. And I think they've done it. This is a preferable approach, I think, compared to the original approach they were taking, which was the voluntary, getting the automakers to voluntarily implement automatic emergency braking. This, they're setting a target in terms of a result, an outcome, performance-based standard setting. So as we try to solve these problems, every conversation here practically, if it's with a sensor company or someone trying to build a solution, comes down to it's going to cost. You know, it's $100, it's $200, it's $50. Now we know the prices come down over time, but they start out somewhere else. From Torsten's presentation, it almost seems like the Chinese have completely overcome this problem. Now, have they overcome it with volume? I honestly don't know precisely. Have they overcome it via competition? The fact that so many Chinese automakers have implemented LiDAR is a sobering prospect for the rest of the industry, because outside of China, everybody says cost, 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 and of course Elon Musk says we don't need LiDAR. And when Elon Musk says we don't need LiDAR, that shifts the conversation away from, because you know he's just trying to save a buck. It's not really a technical conversation. He's just trying to save money and justify it by claiming it's not needed. It may very well be needed, okay? But there are three scenarios that we're looking at in the industry. So we have all these sensors. The cost of vehicles go up. Maybe vehicle ownership goes down. I don't have the data in front of me here for you, but I think we all know that car sales outside of China have flattened or declined. Now, it's not clear whether this is temporary, but car prices have gone up. So that's a concern. What's the second scenario? The second scenario is swarm intelligence. Will we solve this problem by allowing vehicles to communicate with each other and avoid collisions in that fashion, and allow for more vehicles to move more efficiently on the existing highways that we have by vehicle-to-vehicle communications. Maybe that'll work. We've been talking about it for 2 or 3 decades now, and we still haven't brought that to market. This one, I don't hear a lot of people talking too much about, scenario 3, which is vehicle-to-infrastructure communications. But I do hear a lot about this in regard to LiDAR being implemented all over the place, not just around infrastructure, highway infrastructures, but also in retail stores and airports. LiDAR is attractive because it doesn't present a privacy violation. But it's extraordinary in terms of the applications that it can enable. And I dare to suggest that traffic management is an unexplored or underexplored opportunity for LiDAR technology in particular. But infrastructure-enabled automated driving. And where this conversation is already taking place is, of course, in automated valet parking. So that the 2 standards-based approaches are either sensors on the vehicle only or sensors enhanced by infrastructure in the parking structure. This has turned into something of a logjam, so it hasn't really moved. And that debate, that discussion hasn't solved that problem of automated valet parking. However, the conversation has moved into the world of fleets and distribution centers and marshalling yards for vehicles, where, again, they're talking about a sensors on the vehicle only approach or infrastructure-enabled automated driving. So it's something to think about, and it is something that is emerging in the marketplace, and it would be a third scenario to solving the problems that we have with automated driving. Is the Daimler brain computer interface the solution? Okay, I was semi-serious there. So now I want to bring this conversation around to my area of expertise which is car connectivity. So I do believe car connectivity is going to and is playing a critical role in safety and in sensing, actually. With the onset of 5G, which does bring with it C-V2X technology, safety is now part of the connectivity conversation in the car. It only used to be for automatic crash notification. Now, cellular connectivity is implicated in collision avoidance. And I think we're underestimating the importance of this reality when we talk about it today. It is evolving. It is an unsolved problem. I like to say, since car connectivity is something of an expertise that I have, that the automotive industry will never solve this problem. And so I like to say it's sort of a lifetime employment guarantee. We are never going to solve connecting cars with cellular technology. So it's an ongoing evolution. And car makers, however, recognize they need that connectivity because we have the software-defined vehicle, and we need to be able to update that software as well as guaranteeing its cybersecurity. So Toyota just gave up a couple of years ago and just said, okay, 10 years free connectivity, obviously for low bandwidth applications. But they need to be connected to their cars, but they can't get consumers to pay for that connection. GM is giving 8 years of free connectivity. Volvo's giving 5 years of free connectivity because the cars must be connected. But as more and more cars are becoming connected, automakers are realizing, oh, we should be sharing alerts and urgent information between the cars, okay? So multimodality is essential in vehicle connectivity. 5G, Wi-Fi, private 5G, C-V2X, satellite non-terrestrial network connectivity, or, if you will, direct-to-device connectivity that the smartphones are adopting, or what the FCC mandated in the US, which was supplemental connectivity from space. So that's going to become a new problem that the industry is going to have to solve. There's also in the US, so we have ATSC 3.0, which will be digital television to the car. That's another story. But in that regard, part of the conversation, and I didn't include any slides on this, but I have found that this is a major focal point when we talk about automating the driving task. I don't think it's a secret to anyone here that there are plenty of executives in the automotive industry that want to get to that point when they can have video in the front of the car, in the dashboard. So we've seen multiple automakers demonstrating streaming video, social media, video conferencing, gameplay in the front seat of the car. So we're headed in that direction. We want to talk about safety here, but that is part of the conversation. This talks about the timing of satellite arriving in cars. I'm not going to dwell on this. This is a chart from the 5G AA technical report on non-terrestrial network connectivity. I'm sharing that with you because you should be aware that this is coming. This talks about the FCC activity in the US. The US DOT also put out a V2X deployment plan. I think this is, I'll be kind and say it's aspirational, and the significance of that don't crash into things, stop hitting things, is it shifted the conversation away from the V2X conversation, but the US DOT has not given up on that. So V2X still is a goal. But my final thoughts, satellite connectivity will finally deliver true ubiquitous connectivity to vehicles, and it's clear that connectivity is implicated in the kinds of safety systems that we're talking about here. Level 2 automation like GM Super Cruise requires an OnStar subscription. The vehicle needs to know what's coming on the road ahead and needs to leverage the connectivity for that information. LiDAR will influence on-vehicle and infrastructure sensing and communications. We would be wise not to underestimate how rapidly LiDAR may come to be adopted, perhaps in part in response and facilitated by what's happening in China. Intervehicle communications is just beginning and will play a role. Standards are needed for sharing sensor data on those safety systems. So there are conversations around this taking place in the industry, like Covisa, the VSS standard, and others. We need to make it possible for cars to communicate with each other across brands, not just within brands. Improvements in AI and edge computing will determine the path forward. Those conversations are happening right here on the show floor and on this stage. Costs will fall, enabling greater affordability and saving vehicle ownership. Thank goodness, and thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Roger. Another perspective on highlighting how complicated this technology ecosystem is and how many different kind of solutions are involved in moving us forwards. Thank you very much. So we have some time for some questions. Please raise your hand. One down at the front. Good catch.
So Roger, where do you see a merger between what I would call the connected cloud or crowdsourced vehicle data sets that not only are communicating to the vehicle itself, but also aggregating data about how the vehicle is performing? And the kind of work that the people that are here doing, which is trying to understand how their sensors are performing in the full spectrum of the environment, different times of year, et cetera. Do you see the OEMs and these new cloud-connected vehicles almost becoming self-healing in that they're able to identify problems in such a way that between organizations like US DOT or you know, whatever the equivalents are in the various road agencies around the world, that hotspots can be identified that will allow for improvements that will make these vehicles operate better? Or do you see automotive turning more internally and just simply focusing on their own technologies and not sharing or cooperating on safety in the broad spectrum?
What was that, 5 questions? No, so I have a few thoughts. One thought is, you know, I've always had this vision that you're driving into the city and there's one of those green signs and it says, accept cookies, you know, in your car. So you're communicating your location and your behavior, and your car is immediately infused with all the traffic light timing and all the emergency vehicle and construction work that's going on. So that's one thought. The other thought is we used to want to connect to cars because there was a multi-billion-dollar market for vehicle diagnostics, CRM, customer relationship management, service scheduling. I don't know if you own an EV, but there's not a lot of service going on with an EV. You know, dealers don't want to sell you an EV in the US because they may never see you again. But what has changed with connectivity in the car, and some automakers understand this and some do not, is that we have been historically a B2B industry. We sell to dealers, the dealers sell to the consumer. Once we put that connection in the car, that has established a quality of service commitment. That has established a different relationship with the consumer, a direct relationship with the customer. Not a lot of automakers have come to grips with that reality. And that's the challenge that we have. But with regard to clearinghouses for data, to be determined. That's a big question. But we need to break out of, silos like my BMW only lets other BMWs know about BMW breakdowns. That doesn't make any sense. We need to have clearinghouses. We haven't solved that yet.
More questions? Okay. In which case, thanks, Roger. We'll wrap up there. Great presentation. Thank you.